is a quick run through of some of the releases that we'll be talking about in this final chapter of the King Crimson Deep Dive. So I figured I'd throw this in there, which is the condensed 21st Century Guide to King Crimson, 69 to 2003, which is just a double CD compilation of some of the studio material. So this is the miniature version of what I featured in the very first chapter of this deep dive, which I realized I was mistakenly calling the condensed guide at that point, when actually this is the condensed guide. So the first disc focuses on 69 through 74, and the second disc focuses on 81 through 2003. So I started this chapter off with this as just a general overview of all of the lineups up to this point. And then we have all of the individual releases from the most recent King Crimson. I'll go in chronological order of performance, not release. So first is this Live in Toronto official bootleg, a double CD with a really nice essay inside the packaging by Declan Colgan about just how great the show was, and it is a great show. And we have the first official live album by this release. This is Radical Action to Unseat the Hold of Monkey Mind. Quite a humorous title there. And again, we're back to this double mini LP style packaging. We've got a really nice booklet with lots of good photos and essays from Fripp and David Singleton. So these are both from their 2015 tour. This is from mostly the last show with a few tracks added in from elsewhere. And then we have two of these little gatefolds. The first one has the first two CDs, and then the second one has the third CD and Blu-ray. We have Alive in Vienna 2016, December 1st. This comes in a paper style digipack. So by this point, Bill Rieflin is on a sabbatical due to some of his personal illness, and Jeremy Stacy has joined as the third drummer and additional keyboard player. So this is also a really strong show. Nice to hear some of the changes to the set list. Again, lots of nice pictures. And in the essay, David Singleton talks about how this was initially planned prior to the one I'll show next, but was sidelined because at this point the band had evolved so much that they considered that more of a historical release. So it actually came out after this, which is another official bootleg. This is Live in Chicago, and this has probably my favorite style of digipack, which is just a book bound into the CD jacket, which I really like. I wish more of them were like this. I personally really like this style of digipack. There's an essay in here about how Robert Fripp considers the 8-member version of King Crimson with Bill Rieflin back as a keyboardist, one of his definitive lineups. More on that in the discussion part, but I tend to generally agree with that. I thought this was this is definitely one of the higher recommended ones from this lineup. But the highest recommended live release from this lineup would be this one, which is Meltdown. Back to the mini LP style packaging. Really nice booklet. Robert claims that a transformation took place at these Mexico City shows where version 8.3 of King Crimson became version 9, and again is considered one of his 4 definitive lineups. I would definitely recommend this the most out of all of the live releases here, as this is a truly spectacular set of shows. You get expanded audio on 3 CDs and then a really well done concert video that seems quite intimate, honestly, due to the way it was filmed. And then we have this, which was my introduction to this version of King Crimson, which is Audio Diary 2014 through 2018. So we get 5 CDs here, one from each tour, with a fairly diverse array of tracks here. And I also really like these with the artwork that was used on this. I think these are cool. photographs and whatnot. And then on the insides of each of the jackets, you get a list of tour dates with the indication of which shows, which songs on the CD came from. In terms of value for money and getting the most bang for your buck, this is a phenomenal set. I really enjoyed this. At the time I first bought it, I didn't care for it too much because it took me a while to warm up to this lineup, but I really enjoyed listening to this again and just going through each of the years, getting to hear all of the different lineups with Bill Rieflin out, Jeremy Stacy in, and then both of them in. Really nice booklet here as well. No essay this time, but still a great overview with lots of nice pictures and ticket stubs, etc. So this definitely comes highly recommended as well, just because there's so much in it and you get a diverse array of tracks that pretty fairly represents everything that band did. And then we get the final official bootleg, which is 2021 Music is Our Friend, live in Washington and Albany. So this has a really interesting essay by David Singleton in the book about what it was like touring in the time of COVID, since all of the tour dates for 20 had to be rescheduled for 21. And then we get this final thing, which is In the Court of the Crimson King, the documentary, a box set. So this is a really cool box set. Again, the mini LP style, but we do get a thicker, perfect bound book this time with some thoughts from the director, Toby Amies. Let's see if I can get that to focus. Some thoughts from David Singleton, some thoughts from Robert Fripp, lots of pictures from the film, as well as track listing of what's on the Blu-rays and what's on the CDs. The CDs are a little bit of a curious compilation, but certainly nice to have, and a good way to end this extended King Crimson marathon. My only gripe with this box set is, again, they decided to include everything on Blu-ray and DVD, when really Blu-ray would have been just fine, or they could have done two different versions, one with Blu-ray and one with DVD. So there's the Blu-rays, there's the DVDs, same exact material, and then we have two these gatefolds for the CDs. Here's 1 and 2. Of course, there's a different picture of each of the different members on the front and back of each sleeve. And then CDs 3 and 4, and that just fell out. So that's all of the releases, which we'll discuss in this video. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. I'm Brandon Ware. You're watching Angel 65, my channel for all things music related, my own music posts as well as music discussions. And today we are watching the final episode of the King Crimson Deep Dive, Chapter 11, covering the 2014 through 2021 final lineup of the band, which went through 3 different variations. So on these first 2 releases, which were recorded within a few days of each other, we have Robert Fripp, of course, Jacko Jaksic on guitar and voice, Tony Levin on bass and stick, Mel Collins on flutes and saxes, Pat Mastelotto, Gavin Harrison, and Bill Rieflin on drums. I will admit that it took me a while to warm up to this lineup. I wasn't initially sure about it, because when I first got into it, this was the current lineup, and I was definitely focusing on everything that came before, the studio albums and live material, etc. When I first heard about this lineup, I have to admit, I really thought of it more as a greatest hits kind of King Crimson cover band. I wasn't convinced that it deserved the name King Crimson, or that this should be considered an official lineup of the band. I also heard about how frustrated Adrian was about the way he was let go, and I completely sympathize with his frustration. But you know what? After several years of getting used to this lineup and spending the last week going through this whole set of releases by this band, I have to say I think I was wrong, and I truly believe that this is one of the finest periods in King Crimson's history. I thought the 7 and 8 person lineups really did justice. They focus quite heavily on the 70s material. They don't focus on much of the Ballou material, and what they do perform from the Ballou material, they reinterpret quite heavily. A good example of that is Vroom. You get Vroom on both of these, and it's definitely a very different arrangement to the Thrack double duo or double trio band. It's a lot less aggressive, and it's almost more jazzy with the way Mel uses his baritone sax and stuff, but you know what? I really like it. I really like the drum trio moments on these, and I really like the way they reinterpret some of the 70s stuff. They do a lot more laid back version with mallets and stuff of Epitaph, which I think really works well. They do Level 5 really well. They do Sailor's Tale extremely well. I think that they perform it better than the original Islands band did. I think some of this stuff really benefits from these new arrangements. And in particular with the lyrics, you know I had mentioned that some of Pete Sinfield's lyrics bothered me and I found them corny and a bit over the top. But you know what? With someone singing them who has a great voice and actually believes them, some of these really come to life. So I've had some reconsideration of some of these lyrics simply because Jacko performs them so convincingly. It took me a while to warm up to Jacko too, because he's definitely got a less rock and roll voice than, I mean, especially Greg Lake and maybe John Wetton as well. But he certainly brings a lot of character and a lot of life to the material that Gordon Haskell and Boz Burrell sang. I personally find him a much better singer with a lot more character than either of those guys. He's not better than Adrian Belew, and he's definitely not better than Greg Lake, but the way he interprets the material is very unique to him, and I really appreciate what he does. You can tell he has a lot of fun with it and puts himself into it. And that's one of the things that makes this lineup fascinating. Initially, I was reserved about the triple drummers too. I'm like, 2 was already more than enough. Do you really need 3? But you know what? The way they interpret the parts and split them across the 3 drum sets, and sometimes some of them are not even playing. Sometimes it's just 1 drum set, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3. The way they do these things, I really appreciate. So these are both great releases. Of the 2 of them, this has a Blu-ray, which makes it more interesting, but this is probably the better concert, so that's my thoughts on the initial version. And then we get version 8.2, where we have Jeremy Stacy as the 3rd drummer. Bill Rieflin is on a leave of absence, sadly due to his illness, which we'll talk more about when we get to the documentary. But this is live in Vienna, which was initially scheduled as the next official bootleg, but was postponed till after version 8.3 because version 8.3 was maybe the most definitive version of this period of the band. But this is still a really good concert, and you get some new introductions on this, particularly their version of Indiscipline, which, again, when I first heard it, I was not sure about it. I didn't know if I really liked it that much, the way they turned it into an actual sung piece of music rather than the spoken word thing. And you know what? Again, after some reconsideration, I actually like it. I think it adds to the character, the humor, and the silliness of it. So, yeah, their version of Indiscipline gets a thumbs up for sure. And you also get Circus on this, which, again, like I said, I really appreciate the way this band does it. I think it's much better than what was on Lizard. I think they actually show the music in this song. And then you hear them do their version of Heroes, which I must say I do like less than when the double duo did it on that Heavy Construction album. I think Jacko's voice is a bit abrasive for the song, but it still works, and it's a fun song, a good one to include in the encore. And of course, we have to talk about 21st Century Schizoid Man, which is the consistent final encore from this lineup, because Gavin Harrison's solos on that are just consistently mind-blowing. I have so much respect for Gavin Harrison. I did not mention this in my Thrack video, but in the book for the Thrack box set, there's some quotations from Bill Bruford about how influential Gavin Harrison's book, Rhythmic Illusions, was on that particular version of the band. And it was not until I got that box set that I even put the pieces together that Gavin Harrison was the man who wrote that book, because I actually have that book, and that was one of my earliest drum workbooks that my drum instructor gave me when I was still taking lessons. Fascinating book. I had no idea that, oh wait, this is the same Gavin Harrison that is in the current King Crimson. It never occurred to me. But Gavin Harrison, of the 3 drummers, is by far the most technically proficient. No disrespect to the other 3 technically, if you include Bill Rieflin in there as well, who do some fascinating things and play some very tasteful stuff. But Gavin Harrison is an absolute monster. What a phenomenal drummer he is. It really makes me regret that as I was first getting into King Crimson, they played their final show in Denver as part of their final 21 tour. Of course, at that time, I didn't know it was going to be the final tour. And since I was still just getting into them, I think at that point I had only heard the first couple albums. I thought I should get more familiar with their catalog, and I figured, okay, well, if I decide that I really like this band and want to get into them, which of course I did, then I'll just go see them next year when they come back. Unfortunately, there was no next year, which I did not realize at the time, so I will eternally beat myself up for that. I really wish I had just bought the tickets and gone and seen it, because even though a lot of the music would have been unfamiliar to me at that point, it would have blown my mind based on how good these performances are. This is one of the highlights of the entire week for sure. Live in Chicago, this was an outstanding concert. Some of the versions on here really just throw down, man. I mean, the version of Circus on here is great. Lark's one is great on here. Pictures of a City is great on here. And Islands, I really like how this band does Islands. That's a song that I always just had an issue with, even though it's really pretty on the original album of same name. And I think, again, a lot of it is just down to Boz. Not to be disrespectful to him, because he had his place in the band and was an important part of its history, but his voice just sounded so fragile and not particularly suited to the kind of beauty that a song like that can really deliver. And so, after hearing Jacko sing it, I've again developed a new appreciation for the lyrics and how regal sounding it is. And no disrespect to any of the players from Keith Tippett's band who played on Lizard and on Islands, but with this lineup, with the triple drummers, the additional keyboards, an additional guitar, and just Mel Collins being the solo sax and flute player. He's the one doing all the horn and reed parts. Phenomenal. Absolutely outstanding. Really, really great band that I like. And they do a really good version of the Lizard Suite, too. They skip Prince Rupert Awakens, which I'm all about because I never cared for that section. That's one section where I still think the lyrics are annoying, even with John Anderson singing them. So the fact that they skip that but do the rest of it, and it's a lot more toned down. Really, the drums are the features of everything, and you just get Mel Collins. You don't get three different soloists playing on top of each other, which can get a little irritating. They do this really well. They really bring out some of the musicality in these pieces, because the pieces were never the problem. It was just the arrangements on the original albums that I think downgraded them, but really great stuff. They do Fallen Angel really well, and even the Letters, which I said that I disliked in my Islands video. It's still probably my least favorite song that King Crimson has ever done, and my least favorite that this lineup performs. But again, they still do it much better than the Islands era band. I actually kind of started to get into it. I always feel like they go on too long, and the improv section in the middle lasts about a minute and a half longer than it should. I think you can make the point within 4 minutes, not 6, as these versions tend to creep up to, but overall, still very impressed with this. And as I said in the unboxing, the one that comes most highly recommended is this one. The Blu-ray is fantastic. The 5.1 mixes are fantastic, and these performances are truly off the wall with the 8-man band. If there's one that you're going to pick up to represent this lineup, I would highly recommend this one. I think you can still get it for $30 or less pretty cheaply. It wasn't the first one I came to. The first one I came to was this, which is Audio Diary. And as far as getting the most bang for your buck goes, this is probably the best value, because you get basically everything the band performed represented here, including some of their new compositions, Meltdown, The Light of Day, Breathless, The Errors, things like that. But this is the one that I just felt was truly an outstanding group of performances. And in the Blu-ray version, the way it's shot, the cameras are kind of hidden or placed discreetly on stage, so there's not that much shots of the audience or anything, and it probably doesn't show the scope of the show, but the whole point of that was to not distract the performers, which I can respect, and you still get a lot of cool close-up intimate angles of this band, and you can really see them having fun, particularly on things like Indiscipline, where the three drummers are trading solos. And again, Gavin Harrison's solos on 21st Century Schizoid Man are outstanding. At the risk of getting flagged, I will swear and say that this band kicks ass. I really appreciate what this band does, and I think they are a good way to wrap up the King Crimson chronology. The final official bootleg is this one, Music is Our Friend, recorded on their last tour, including their final American show in Washington, D.C., as well as some extra tracks from The Egg, which I guess was a family and friends concert, so just a small number of attendees. You get some of Tony Cadenza type stuff, and you get Larks 1 and 2 on this, Level 5, Radical Action, Epitaph, Starless, all the hits, if you like. Good performance, but definitely doesn't come as highly recommended as Meltdown. By this point, Bill Rieflin is out of the band. He has sadly passed away, but the 7-man band with Jeremy Stacy in there still does a great version. And the thing that I really was most excited to talk about is this: the In the Court of the Crimson King, King Crimson at 50 documentary by Toby Amies. Now, I don't think I'm being hyperbolic. I think I'm being genuine when I say this might be the single greatest music documentary I have ever seen. It is just a phenomenal documentary. It really is a piece of art. What Toby Amies was able to do with the footage that he captured under some pretty difficult circumstances where there was a lot of things he couldn't film, and certainly there are some moments in there where he's asking Robert questions, and Robert does come off quite confrontational, but the way he's able to paint this band in a positive light and incorporate some of the voices from prior lineups as well is truly amazing. If you're looking for the definitive history of the band, then it's definitely not this movie, but what this movie does do is provide insight to the way the current band works, as well as some insights from previous members. And it's certainly great to hear from particularly Ian MacDonald. I'm glad that this was made before he passed away, to hear some of his thoughts on just his process, what he thinks of music, and why he left King Crimson. It's a really emotional moment when he's talking about how he thinks he broke Robert's heart and how he feels eternally sorry for it. It actually almost brought a tear to my eye, because you can tell that he really means that. And while he did what he thought was right at the time, he realizes that it had an impact not just on the band, but particularly Robert, and how heartfelt it is really meaningful. And you also get to hear from Mike Giles in here, Adrian Belew, all the members of the current band at this point, and there's a big area of focus on Bill Rieflin, just him talking about his illness, and that was also very touching, just to hear some of his thoughts on life and on music, and just is a firm reminder of how precious it is when people like that get to perform, and they choose to spend their golden years or their twilight years performing, which he did. And you know, he definitely a valued member of the band, and certainly had a good sense of humor. I really appreciated that they focused on him quite a bit. Unfortunately, you know, it would have been nice had they decided to do this a couple years earlier, because then we could have heard from John Wetton and Greg Lake, and even Boz Burrell, who all passed away before this was made. It would have certainly been nice to hear their thoughts as well. And those periods of the band are a little bit overlooked, but, you know, for what it is, it's a phenomenal documentary. I mean, really 5 out of 5. It is a piece of art, this film. What Toby Amies was able to do with fairly limited footage and interviews was phenomenal, and I really, really admire his filmmaking on this. I really admire David Singleton and Robert Fripp for drafting him to do this based on his first film. And just someone who wasn't particularly privy to the history of King Crimson, and I admit in some press interviews promoting this that was not even necessarily a big fan of King Crimson, I think brings a unique perspective to what the band is and what it does. So I really, really like this documentary. This comes extremely highly recommended. The documentary itself, the package in general, a bit of a strange one, this. You get the documentary on disc 1, as well as you get like 2 segments of additional footage, which is fun as well. And then you get Tring live in the studio, which is great. Just the 7 members in a circle performing to a studio, not a live concert. And then you get Live in Rio, which is really cool. And then you get the CDs, which the CDs are definitely a bit of an oddity, the way they're compiled. It's all music that's featured in the film, though not necessarily the same version. So I'll do like a brief overview of what you get. So CD1, introductory Bellscape, and then you get the original 21st Century Schizoid Man, Alive Moonchild, including cadenzas, alt mix of cat food. You get the Lizard Suite, which is fascinating because it includes the piano version, Keith Tippett of Prince Rupert Awakes, which is featured on that alternative guide to King Crimson back in the 69 to 72 vinyl box set, and then that leads into the rest of the performance, which is live in Rome at the Pompeii Arena, I think. Bolero, Dawn Song, Last Skirmish, and Prince Rupert's Lament. And then you get the soundtrack from Tring on here, Letters, Sailor's Tale, Easy Money live, and then the alt mix of Lark's Tongues Part 2, which again was in that vinyl box set. Just guitar, bass, and drums, no violin. Interesting alt mix. Fracture from Tring, Fallen Angel, the original song. Discipline from Tring, Cadence and Cascade from Tring, Construction of Light live, which this band just does the first part of it, they don't do the vocal part of it. Peace, live in Vienna, Mate Kudasai, alternate intro. The Mincer, very interesting inclusion. The way it was used in the film is very interesting. Nice to have that track on there. Scarcity of Miracles, one of their newer songs. And then the Radical Action Suite from Tring, which is Radical Action 1, Meltdown, Radical Action 2, and Level 5. Cool way to put those pieces together. And then it ends with Peace, a theme. On this one, you get Drumzilla, so drum opening to the show. Waiting Man from Freyjuice, Seizure from the Roar of P4, which I actually found myself getting into, despite some of the derogatory things I said about the projects. That one was actually interesting. I don't know why this particular performance wasn't included on the project CDs, because it's better than basically anything else on there. Talking Drum, alternate mix. Indiscipline live with the 3 drummers, amazing. Exposure from Robert Fripp's Exposure album, which I must admit I have not heard. I really should check it out though. Fascinating track. Vroom live by the most recent band, which leads into Coda from the double trio lineup. Darts from the League of Crafty Guitarists, and then you get Requiem from Beat, the extended version, which again, very interesting how that was used in the film. And then on the final CD, Walk On from Rio, Lark's Tongues live by the recent band, Breathless live, this entire disc is live, One More Red Nightmare, Epitaph, Frame by Frame, Pictures of a City, Red, Court of the Crimson King, and then the last disc closes with Starless, the final performance in Tokyo, the video of which is also included on the Blu-ray. And yeah, pretty emotional moment. I think you can see it. They're hiding it well, but you can tell that the band realizes this is it. After 7 years of performing, this is it. After they finish the song and everyone walks off, Robert Fripp walks out once more. And you can tell he's very emotionally moved by the moment. So very touching to see that. A bizarre compilation, but a pleasurable listen, and I like that it ends with Starless, the final performance. It's a good way to end this long King Crimson marathon. So overall, this final band gets 2 big thumbs up. I like it a lot, and again, I regret that I did not go see it. At least I got to see Beat, which still had Tony Levin in it, and of course Adrian Belew, but I wish I had gone to see this. I will forever regret that I did not go see this when it was in Denver for their final tour. If I had known it was the final tour, I probably would have went, but like I said, was just getting into the band. So if you have seen the most recent King Crimson, what did you think of it? Was it as outstanding as I believe it would have been? I certainly hope so. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that if you saw the final version live and what you thought of it, particularly them focusing more on the 70s than the 80s material, because after so much of that 80s and 90s stuff with those 2 big box sets and then the double duo stuff, it was nice to kind of go back to the beginning and come full circle and hear them play a lot of stuff which had never ever been performed live, like One More Red Nightmare and things like that. And to hear them do that, they do it really well. Of the list of releases that I just showed, the ones that come most highly recommended are certainly Meltdown, and then the documentary, which if you're not interested in the CDs, you can just get a standalone Blu-ray DVD with just the documentary part of it. But if you're brand new to this lineup, then this might actually be a really good place to start because it gives you a good overview of this lineup live on the CDs, as well as some stuff from prior lineups as well. And the documentary itself, like I said, is absolutely phenomenal. What a beautiful, beautiful film it is. All right, that's it. We've reached the end of King Crimson. General thoughts. Well, it's clear they're one of the best and most important bands ever, progressive rock or otherwise, whatever you want to call them. King Crimson is a way of doing things. Yeah, it is. And the way they did things was completely and utterly unique. I mean, they invented multiple subgenres throughout their 50-year career. Robert Fripp, if you're ever watching this, I hope you know that I have deep, deep, deep respect for you and your musical philosophy, and just what you've done over the years with this band has been amazing. And as a young person that just got into you guys a few years ago, you know, it's truly changed my life and the perspectives I have on music. So it was really great to go through their entire history chronologically and just hear the band develop throughout its career with different lineups and hear those lineups develop. Overall, of all the releases I've talked about in this series, what are my top 3, the ones that come most recommended? Well, it's tough because we've been through so much, but in terms of the most historically interesting and value for money, the Starless box set for sure goes in there. The Starless box set is outstanding. If you can find that for a relatively good price, then I highly recommend that. I think it's the best overview of the 70s band, and the shows have outstanding sound quality. I see it's gone up in price quite a bit, so I'm definitely glad I picked it up when I could without paying a fortune for it. But if you can find a copy of that for a decent price, then that one for sure comes highly recommended. What else? That would be number 1. Of everything I've listened to, that was the best of the box sets for sure. This comes highly recommended just because it's a great history of this version of the band and the band in general, and the thoughts from the individual musicians are really phenomenal to hear, particularly Bill Bruford. I love what he has to say. I also love what Trey Gunn has to say. There's clearly a sense of humor about this, but I mean, they don't hold any punches. They admit that this was a tough band to be in, and it was tough to be around Robert for many years. I appreciate their honesty there, but you know what? If it takes someone that's quite difficult to work with to produce the music that King Crimson produced across its history, then I suppose it's worth it. And the musicians basically said as much. You know, Adrian Belew says in the film that Robert just has a way of pulling people together and creating situations where music occurs that it could not otherwise happen except in that circumstance, and that's what King Crimson is all about. So the Starless box set, this, and then of the other box sets and whatnot, the other one that I would probably recommend the most is, I really liked the Thrak box. That one was also an enjoyable moment for me just because of the way it was arranged and the shows that were picked, as well as the visual material to see what that lineup did live. Fascinating. If all of those are out of the question, then some of the releases that you should start with, that 21st Century Guide to King Crimson Volume 1 and 2 is a great overview of all the live and studio material up until 2003. So if you're a brand new fan but still want a pretty comprehensive overview of everything in the band's history up until 2003, then that's a great place to start. I got those. I had some of the big releases before that, but that's definitely a great overview and still a super enjoyable listen. And as far as the albums, well, my favorites, Thrak, Starless and Bible Black, Starless and Bible Black, In the Court of the Crimson King, Discipline, and in 5th place, probably put Red in there. Those are probably my top 5, but all of them except Lizard and Islands come highly recommended. I mean, they're definitely all worth checking out. And in terms of some of the best shows overall, the shows that, if you can't get the big box sets, that you should still seek out, that some individual CD releases that are available or downloads on DGM Live. The Concert Cabal show, For sure, of course, the show from which most of Starless Bible and Bible Black was created. Outstanding show, and to hear Trio and the Starless and Bible Black improvs in context, certainly amazing. The Asbury Park concert, which you can get on the 40th anniversary edition of USA, the unedited version with David Cross performing, also a great, outstanding performance. Hyde Park, the big show that really broke the original King Crimson, certainly worth hearing just for its historical value alone, and it is a pretty good performance, even though the sound quality of that particular bootleg is very, very poor, but still definitely worth hearing for its historical value. The 80s concerts, Frey Juice was great. Definitely pick up Neil and Jack and Me if you can't afford the big box set, just so you can see the Noise live in Frey Juice. What else? As far as Thrack goes, the Vroom Vroom album is a great way to start. It has edited versions of Broadway and New York, or Broadway and Mexico City, which you get the full extended double disc concerts of on the Thrack box set. Double Duo, Heavy Construction, definitely worth checking out. And then from this lineup, Meltdown comes highly recommended. Chicago comes highly recommended. And in the box set for the documentary, the Rio and Tring shows are also highly recommended. Let's see, that's 9. Can I get one more in there? Maybe the Earthbound one for Live at Summit Studios was really cool too, just to hear what the Islands band did. They were definitely more of a jam band, but that was a cool performance and the sound quality was really good. So, yeah, it's been a fascinating journey, y'all. And if you've been watching through this entire playlist, thanks for going on the journey with me. King Crimson, I love this band. I really do. One of my all-time favorites, and just to hear how they evolved and truly just kept changing themselves and changing what the perception of them is and the perceptions of just music in general is fascinating. King Crimson is one of the best and most important bands of all time. So if these videos were your introduction to them, or just a nice chance for somebody else, another fan, a younger fan, to explain their thoughts on it, well, I hope you got some value out of this. And yeah, thanks for watching. It's really been a phenomenal journey, and it's been a great way to spend most of my listening time over the past 7 weeks, and then a week before that back in July. So great experience this was. And after all of this music, over 200 hours of King Crimson across the last 40 days, I am definitely ready to move on. So I've already decided what I'll do for my next series on here. I'm going to do another deep dive. I won't tell you the band yet, you'll see, but probably the second best documented band in my entire music collection. I imagine the next series will get less views because it's arguably the most famous band in the world and everybody talks about them, so that should give you a big hint as to who it is. But I figured it would be a nice change of pace after this, and a chance to go back to some other releases that have been sitting on a shelf for a while unused. So that's all for now. Comments below, let me know overall, what is your favorite lineup of King Crimson? What is your favorite period, favorite album, favorite live releases? What are your thoughts on the most recent band? If you've seen the documentary, what do you think about it? If you've seen any former lineups of King Crimson, or you've seen Beat, what did you think about those as well? Is there anything I missed that is worth going back to? I know I had one commenter mention I should check out Heaven and Earth, which I might in the future, but Double Duo was probably not my favorite period, but I'm sure I'll pick it up eventually if it comes down in price, or I see a used copy for good value. It would be nice to have, even if it only gets used once. I might pick it up, listen to it, and sell it if I decide I don't like it. But yeah, what are your thoughts? Let me know. Have a great Thanksgiving week, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.